Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be back here in Minnesota with all of you. I just wanted to share a very brief, probably on the more brief side of reflection on this week's gospel message from Matthew. Confrontation. How do you feel about confrontation? Usually, confrontation does not carry good connotations. Confrontation in our day and time is scary and something that most of us try to avoid. We can easily and confidently predict that confrontation does not end well, and it typically escalates a situation beyond repair. Or when we avoid confrontation altogether, the situation is kept bottled up and hidden away with no real resolution and only growing potential for an explosion. This morning's gospel text seems to be giving the disciples and us a model of healthy confrontation meant to heal and reconcile rather than escalate and break apart relationships within a community. There is much to learn here from this passage in Matthew. Jesus is trying to share with us how we might be together in community in a healthier and productive way, which allows the church to stand for and remain in truth. It is important to keep in mind that this particular passage seems to be discussing a specific case that is taking place, because no one situation is exactly like any other. This model cannot be applied to every situation as it is written, every situation that may arise in our communities. Our goal when we read this gospel is to find the main points and themes which we most definitely can apply to ourselves and really every situation that may arise within the community, because those common themes and points do exist or can exist within every situation. Now, I understand that this sounds kind of vague currently, but stick with me. Hopefully, my thoughts will become clearer. What I drew out of the passage was that Jesus was trying to teach his disciples how to be in community with one another. Now, when in community where people are involved, conflict is bound to arise. Our human nature gives us the capacity to harm one another, and sometimes we mess up in this way. When one person harms another member of the community, something must be done about this. We cannot idly sit by and pretend it did not happen, for if we do, there is an even larger space that has been created by our silence and complicity for such harm to take place again. Jesus is saying that there needs to be open communication and dialogue taking place so that the situation might be healed. Speaking and listening must happen within this dialogue. Listening, as it appears in this text quite frequently, at least 4 times in the first 3 verses, makes its importance within these hard conversations noticeably clear. Listening is just as important, if not more so, in conversations regarding conflict than speaking is. In a healthy dialogue about conflict that arises in a community, people must be willing to listen to each other for the sake of understanding one another and acknowledging the real hurt that has been done. Confrontation should not be used to call out, but instead to call in. What I mean by this is confrontation, when well-intentioned and healthy, should bring about reconciliation and healing, not the escalation and separation that we see when confrontation takes place today. Jesus' idea of conflict resolution and confrontation go against the grain, so to speak, of our day. How we manage conflict and confrontation is so entirely different, as I kind of touched upon earlier in my reflection. I feel challenged by this text. I feel challenged to stand up and speak on not only my behalf when I'm wronged, but also the behalf of those who are not being heard. I feel challenged to listen to those who raise hurts and harms that I have committed against them. I feel challenged to empower those who have been hurt to speak their piece and cause others to listen and see. These are the challenges that this passage faces us with, especially in a time when conflict and broken community is all around us, presenting itself in various ways. But as much as I am challenged, I am also reassured by this passage. Jesus says in verse 20, "For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them." We can be sure that God is present with us in these conversations. We are called to enter into hard dialogue with each other and the rest of the world for the sake of finding the healing and reconciliation that is so desperately needed today. God walks with us everywhere we go, including and especially these hard places we have been thrust into that we must now boldly confront. These verses from Matthew speak clearly into today, into the politics, and into the racism that plague our media and that we can see everywhere around us. I'm reminded of our book study on Lenny Duncan's Dear Church. Sometimes it's not about confronting individuals and managing conflict between one person and another. Sometimes it's about confronting a whole community or group or system that has inflicted harm and hurt upon individuals or groups of individuals. As much as we would like to avoid it or pretend that it is not true, the church, now I don't mean Trinity, but I mean the church as the institution, has been the source of harm to so many individuals and groups of people based on race, sexuality, gender, and anything else we come up with to label and discriminate against. Pastor Duncan, in his book, expresses that the church is a beautiful place where he once found grace and acceptance abounding. He also shares that the church over time has strayed from God in its true purpose and calling in the world. Duncan names the many ways in which the church has caused harm instead of grace and love. As the church, Duncan is confronting us with this very real reality. We should listen to his words and hurts that he has expressed for the purpose of understanding. Duncan does not want people to listen for the sake of responding or calculating a counter argument. His confrontational sharing within his book is meant to foster the sort of healing and reconciliation that the church needs in order to return to its truth, which is love and grace for all. I think in today's time, Duncan and his book are a great example of how we are being challenged by this gospel from Matthew. We must enter into hard places and hard conversations. Constructive critique and confrontation is needed to bring about the healing our world is pleading for. God is a God of reconciliation, and He demands that we, as the church, be a community of reconciliation. Unafraid to empower, speak on behalf, and to listen to the most vulnerable and those being trampled on today. God will be with us as we go into these hard places. So go.